Hello, everyone! So, if you guys are like me, you've seen a lot of discard decks rolling around in Standard, causing some trouble for some of the decks that aren't able to deal with that, which is why I put together this Golgari Midrange deck, which I've been playing a whole bunch of and really enjoying on the ladder. Now, this deck does two things really well. It beats discard decks almost all the time, and it's very strong when it comes to stabilizing against aggro. I feel like the only deck that really will give this particular deck some issues are some of the like rabbit-based convoke style decks where they're going wide and hitting you for a ton of damage on the early turns before you're able to stabilize. And even in that point, you can win those games. It's just more draw dependent. So let me just talk a little bit about what we're doing with this deck, why we included some of those cards. Deck list is down in the description if you want to take a look and build it for yourself. So down at the 1 mana slot, we've got Bushwhack. This is great for ramp and a fight spell, and Tail Swipe, which is strictly a fight spell. This is going to be really strong for us because we have creatures that we definitely want our opponents dealing damage to, like Phyrexian Obliterator, which is a great use for any of those fight spells, right? And force our opponent to sacrifice a bunch of permanents. And also Shieldred has Death Touch, so this is a great way to go ahead and have her fight someone. Same thing with Glissa. Glissa having Death Touch, we can take down creatures much bigger than we normally would be able to. In the 2 mana slot, Mosswood Dread Knight is going to be a value engine for us over the course of the game, drawing cards and losing life, or gaining life if we have Shieldred on the battlefield, and then of course being a 3/2 trample creature. This is just a nice recurring threat for our opponent to have to deal with over the course of the game. Now we are including 2 copies of Cruel Claw's Heist here. And this is really strong for disrupting our opponent's game plan, especially if they're playing a more late game centric deck, one that has board wipes or something like that, that could really disrupt that game plan that we have. Because again, we do want to keep our creatures on the board and we do want to be hitting our opponents. So we have this to kind of mess with our opponent. This is also great against anyone trying to do some sort of combo shenanigans, right? We can go ahead and get that stopped very quickly. Up in the 3 mana slot, I know we said that we don't like discard decks, but that doesn't mean we can't run discard ourselves. We do have Thoughtstalker Warlock. This guy's a great creature. 2/2 with Menace isn't the perfect body, but the fact that if we've dealt damage to our opponent, we basically get to Thoughtseize them here with that is very strong. So we're going to be using this to make sure, once again, that we can kind of pick out those cards that our opponent has that would be able to counter us in some of those more late game matchups. Now, Liliana of the Veil, we're also including 2 copies of. The discarding, hopefully we are going to be outvaluing our opponents in the mid game. This is really strong for us, though, against late game decks. And just entering the battlefield and having our opponent sack a creature is surprisingly strong against aggro decks, which are focusing on kind of buffing up single creatures to deal a lot of damage. So this is a really strong turn 3 play. I never really feel bad about having Lily here. And of course, if we do get to the point where we're close to -6 and we're just going to beat our opponent. And Glissa is the value machine here. First strike, Death Touch, it makes it very hard for our opponent to ever swing out and deal combat damage to us if they have a creature centric strategy. So also surprisingly good against those aggro decks. Additionally, Glissa can give us extra card draw. It can destroy some enchantments we don't like and remove counters from permanents if that's something we need to do. So all around great card here. Shieldred stabilizes us in the mid game. Against any aggro deck, getting down life gain is going to be the difference between winning and losing, and having Shieldred hit the battlefield to both block aggro's creatures and restore life to us is going to be really good. We already talked a little bit about how Phyrexian Obliterator is a fantastic blocker, and even better when we force it to fight our opponent's creatures. And then we have another one of those discard hate cards here. This is the Obstinate Bailoff. Now, this guy will gain us 4 life when he enters the battlefield, so even if we're not up against the discard deck, just playing this guy out to gain some life, always going to be worth it. It's going to give us a little bit of that edge that we need, especially when so many of these decks are focusing on punishing your life total either in one big hit or a little bit at a time, slowly draining you. This will buy us the extra turns that we need to gain control of the board. Additionally, if a spell or ability an opponent controls causes us to discard this guy, we'll put him right on the battlefield under our control. So who would say no to a free 4/4 with 4 life, right? This is the absolute bane of discard decks and will immediately switch a match in our favor, especially if they hit us with a turn 1 discard where we get to pick the card we discard. And the last card that we have here worth talking about is Virtue of Persistence. Now, as a 2 mana, -3/-3, gain 2 life, this is a great way to both destroy one of our opponent's creatures and have a little bit more value in the early game, right? Keeping aggro off of us is going to be very strong. And then in the late game, this is another reason why this deck is so good against discard. If we can get this down on the battlefield with enough lands, we can just start getting our creatures back each turn. And, I mean, that's ultimately going to be able to win us the game. I mean, whatever our opponent has in terms of damage, they won't be able to keep up with gaining life and or throwing a shielder down on the battlefield every time they try and kill it. Now, last thing to just talk about, our mana base here. We only have 2 forests in this deck. I could say you could even go down and have only 1 forest because we don't want that much strictly green mana because our mana base is very black intensive, especially with Phyrexian Obliterator. Blooming Marsh we have 4 copies of. We have 4 copies of Llanowar Waste and 4 copies of Restless Cottage. Now, Restless Cottage being that 4/4 as an attacker is another good option for us in the mid-game if our opponent does have us in a position where we don't have many cards in hand. Additionally, when it attacks, we can create a food token and exile a card from our opponent's graveyard, so this is good for interrupting graveyard strategies, as well as keeping us in the game against aggro, again, because we're getting that food token and able to sustain ourselves. So yeah, if you guys have been enjoying my content, make sure you subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on my latest videos. And if you do enjoy this video, make sure you give it a like. Let's go ahead and see how this deck does. So we're on the play here. Honestly, I can't really keep this starting hand. I'd like to see something a little bit nicer like this. This is pretty much exactly what we want to see. I'm going to go ahead, keep, and we have a judgment call to make. If we think our opponent's going to play a discard spell turn 1, it's going to be better to have the Baloth in hand. So I'm going to go ahead and bottom our Obliterator here. Start with the Blooming Marsh, just in case we draw another one. Next turn, we can protect. Oh, perfect. Now, you could make a case for Virtue here, or for saving Virtue for a different creature our opponent might cast later, but I don't really mind. Next turn we can play Lily, have them sack their creature. This deck that our opponent's playing is, heavily focused on keeping creatures on the battlefield. Life gain on the Baloth is also going to be much better for us, so let's go Lily. Glissa is also a good blocker, but I just like being able to punish our opponent for having a little bit of an aggressive hand. Yeah. If we don't draw land, Glissa. If we do, potentially Obliterator. See if they hit Lily. They shouldn't, but they do. I mean, they're just wasting time on their deck. If we can get down some sort of life gain, our opponent's not going to be able to kill us. Glissa is incredibly powerful. This is going to blank a lot of their attacks. I will say that all the life gain that we do have packed in here does make this deck fairly strong against aggro. Sure, Slick Shot. And attacking just with the Slick Shot. And the Scamp. We do have to be careful, because there exists a situation where our opponent can just kill us. Now, we can look for a land here, but I do honestly think that it's going to be much better to play for control over our board. We're going to fight with Glissa here. I could remove the counter, potentially. But I think it's going to be better to keep Glissa as a blocker here. And one more land is going to be big for us. We'll be able to start playing out our things. Okay. Honestly, that's fine by me. Opponent's wasting one of their more useful combo pieces. I mean, we know how this deck works. We played a very similar one just the other day. Cacophony Scamp. Won't sack it. We still have 14 life. I think if we start gaining life off of our Baloths, we're going to be good. But we do need that land for it. Oh, wait, they do sacrifice the Cacophony Scamp. I genuinely don't think our opponent is going to be able to win this game at this point. We play out another Glissa. Okay. We'll see if they attack. Okay, that's fine. So they kill the Glissa. They'll be able to swing for 4 here. Again, as long as we can find this land, we are going to be okay. I am not at all concerned. And we do. Now, you could make a case for gaining life, but I'm gonna just take a little bit of a bet here, knowing that our opponent has 2 of the Callous Sellswords already. I'm gonna think one of the other ones is gonna be a little bit lower in the deck. We're gonna play out the Obliterator. This is just gonna blank our opponent's next attack, and make it a little bit stronger in the case that we do draw a fight spell next turn. I mean, if we draw a fight spell, we win the game. Next turn, essentially, we'll just slam the Obliterator into the Sellsword, and our opponent's gonna sack all their permanents and not gonna be able to come back. But from here on out, we'll be playing our Baloths. We'll be gaining our life. Yep, no attacks. Oh, perfect. See, so this is why we played Obliterator last turn, so we'll go ahead fight here. Opponent's going to have to sack 4 permanents. They're basically back to square one, and we've got it. Okay, so for a hand on the play, honestly, I think this looks really good. We're going to go ahead and keep... I like having an early Virtue in hand. It's gonna be good to kind of interact with our opponent's early board state. Thoughtstalker Warlock will be good to punish their hand just a little bit. Again, for a deck that hates discard decks, we do run discard of our own, which is perfectly fine by me. So turn 1, I think we're going to want to play out the Restless Cottage. After that, we might want to use Bushwhack to find a land. We might save it to fight. I'd like to know a little bit more about our opponent's deck first. Alright, Spyglass Siren here. Now, I could use Virtue. I don't think I will. I'm just going to go ahead and pass here. So next turn, we'll have a couple more options. Okay, Gleeful, yep. So we are looking at some sort of, like, Convoke style deck. We'll play out the Warlock, force a discard. We now have advantage on hand size. Yep, there's the Battlecry creature, perfect. Yeah, if anything comes in that we're too afraid of, we'll use our Virtue to kind of get rid of that. Let's play out Glissa here. And honestly, I think we're just going to get rid of the Siren. It doesn't particularly matter, but we'll also attack. They'll want to keep their tokens up, so we'll get our free 2 damage. This just kind of shifts things, so they're a little bit more difficult for our opponent if they are going to be tapping down creatures to try and get something out. I'm curious if they do include white in their deck. It doesn't seem like they will, but they might, especially with Imodane's Recruiter here. I mean, we'll take 6. Down to 12. Okay, Blooming Marsh. Let's move to combat. I will attack with everything here. Let's go ahead and draw a card. We find a Tail Swipe. Tail Swipe isn't bad, since we can use that on Glissa. I will gain us a little bit of life here. Then I'll play out a tap Blooming Marsh, because we don't care that badly. Tail Swipe being an instant is great. We can interact with a creature our opponent plays that causes a problem for us. Alright, so we're going to respond here, and I'm just going to smack that guy. It's going to save us a little bit of extra damage. Yep, take 4 here. Okay, and then this is where things start getting a little easier for us. We just play out a Phyrexian Obliterator. I'll keep... Do I want to keep the Thoughtstalker Warlock back? No, I think I keep attacking here. We'll draw a card. Okay, Baloth. This is going to give us some life gain. I think our opponent's a little far behind the curve right now, and yep, we've got it. Okay, so right off the bat, I mean, this looks pretty good. I want to keep this. The tap lands make things a little bit slow for us, but we have Cottage, Marsh, and Virtue for turn 2 removal. Not terrible. 2 Obliterators in hand gives us something nice to work towards as well. I'm sure we'll draw one of our black lands, be able to play out the Obliterator. Alright, play the Cottage. So, right off the bat, we are either looking at some sort of Prowess deck, or with these colors, more likely than not, a Convoke deck. Let's go draw ourselves an extra card. Alright, looking good. Next turn we can Cottage Virtue if our opponent plays something, but they don't. Interesting. I still think we play the Cottage out tapped, and now we'll get our Knight down on the battlefield. Alright. The opponent thinking about what they want to do here. They have had a very slow early game, especially considering the deck that I think they're playing. Alright, so maybe not. We could be looking at a board wipe here. And I think I'm actually okay leaving Mosswood Dread Knight in the graveyard. Okay, interesting. So yeah, they're going to try and get one with a Multiverse back. That makes sense. We're just going to play out an Obliterator here. Next turn we can play another one in a Bushwhack. I think if our opponent does get some sort of creature onto the battlefield, we're going to be able to very easily deal with it. Okay, so right off the bat, we are going to gift a card here. Let's take a look at our opponent's hand, take something good away from them. Sure, get lost, get rid of the Obliterator, get some map tokens. Okay, so we steal an ill-timed explosion. Our opponent doesn't really have anything going on in their deck anymore. Let's just plus here, have them discard a card. I do kind of want to keep Bushwhack, so I am going to discard an Obliterator here. Alright, so whatever that card is the only thing that really matters for our opponent. Alright, let's go play the Obliterator out again. And then we'll crack a map token, see what we have on top. It's a swamp. I will play the swamp. And then we'll just plus again. Ironically enough, I think we do get rid of the Bailoff here. We don't actually get it onto the battlefield. Let's go ahead and crack the next map token, see what we've got going on here. Alright, Thoughtstalker Warlock. That can actually go in the graveyard as well. I think we can draw something a little bit better. We're actually almost up at 6 on the Lily of the Veil as well. That's going to be very powerful if we can go ahead and get that off. Opponent top decking here. And they find a land. Yeah, they say good game, we've got it. Okay, so it looks like we have a pretty good starting hand here. I am going to go ahead and keep our opponents going first. Alright, so it looks like we're probably going to be up against another Golgari deck. We're going to go start off with a Bushwhack here, grab ourselves a Swamp. We do want to keep hitting our basic land drops. Oh, maybe not. I really thought that this would be a Roots deck, but I guess it isn't. Let's go ahead and play out another Blooming Marsh. Pass the turn. Next turn we can get down Glissa. Glissa's going to be really good for us. Okay. Yeah, so far I am not concerned. We're looking good. We can stabilize our life total with the Bailoff. Removal spell, that's fine. Next turn we'll play out Bailoff. Yep. So, there we go. Gain some life. Looking good. We have a lot of options with fighting. We can kind of pseudo-clear our opponent's board. Yeah. Alright. I'm gonna start with Cruel Claw's Heist. We will gift a card. I'm gonna just steal something off of our opponents. If they have a removal spell, they would have likely used it there. Okay, so lots of fun things to steal here. Gix's Command, I think, is going to be the one that we want. That's going to basically wipe our opponent's board. I will attack. Let's see. They choose not to block here, which is going to give us better options with the Warlock. We're going to go ahead and get rid of Shieldred, because I don't want to deal with that right now. And of course, we can go ahead and cast Gix's command. Yeah, sure. That's fine by me. So that tells me they don't have a land drop. Alright, so, I mean, I'm kind of surprised that they played out the small creature, especially knowing that we took Gix's command here. So we're gonna go ahead, go with this. And then, do I want my creature back? I think I want the +1/+1 counters and lifelink. So we just wipe their board. Swing for 6, gain 6. Lord Skitter. That's fine. Exile probably... yeah. Glissa, that's funny. So we get our Glissa back here. And we've got it. Alright. Alright, going first here. And I think we can keep this opening hand. It's going to be great if our opponent is playing a discard deck. We have Bushwhack to go ahead and ramp us just a little bit. Again, ideally we do get up to 4 or 5 lands with this deck pretty quickly. Alright, so probably aggro. Yep, that would be my best guess. So let's go Bushwhack. We're going to grab a swamp and play it as land for turn. Just as a side note, the only reason I do that is I don't want our opponent to know that we have a swamp in a hand. That's why I didn't play our other one first. Alright, Manifold Mouse. Sure, so it's basically a mouse aggro deck that we're looking at. I think we play Lily and have them sack that next turn. Yeah, because we could use Virtue, but Virtue will kill one of their other creatures later. Having them sack now, yep, we've got it. Alright, this does not look like a bad starting hand on the play. We will go ahead and keep. I will start with the Restless Cottage. Next turn we can Bushwhack to find another land, which I think we will. I definitely want to make sure we're hitting our 4 lands to play into our Obliterators. With the Tail Swipe, we'll play the Blooming Marsh here, just in case we draw another one. With the Tail Swipe and the Obliterator, we are going to be in a very strong position. I'm going to go ahead and draw a card. Okay, Cruel Claw's Heist isn't bad. We might want to do that next turn, just get an idea of what's in our opponent's hand. Maybe blank a counterspell. Let's go ahead and do that. I'll gift a card. Then we'll play out the Dread Knight as well. So if they use the counterspell here, we'll just get ourselves a 3/2. Yep. Easy. So they counter. We develop a board presence. Better than getting our Obliterator countered as well. And then next turn, even if we want to, we can use the Thoughtstalker Warlock. Okay. Interesting. So, I mean, we do have the ability to just play our Obliterator for free this turn. I mean, you could make a case for taking a look at their hand and disrupting it in case they have a board wipe. I kind of think that that's what I'm going to do. Surely they're running a board wipe, and this is the correct decision, right? Yeah, there we go. Deadly Cover-Up. Yep. Almost was a little too greedy there. Certainly glad that I made the decision that I did. I mean, they have plenty of removal spells. So my guess is cut down the Warlock on our turn, use one of their other removal spells, yep. And they'll draw a card. Obliterator is going to be kind of hard to deal with, though, because they just have Go for the Throat for that. Yep. We knew that they'd cut that down. These go back into their hand, sure. The only unfortunate thing here is, despite having the ability to play out Obliterator, we're actually not going to really be able to fight any of our opponent's creatures there, so let's go ahead, attack here. Yep, gets destroyed. That's fine, because that gives us card draw. And we find another Obliterator. Let's just play that out. They're going to use Go for the Throat on it, and that's fine. That'll slow them down regardless. Replay Dread Knight. You know, there could be a case for killing Dread Knight with Virtue. Just to draw some extra cards. I don't mind that. But we'll see what happens. We do want to be setting up some sort of life gain soon. I know our opponent definitely wants to go for a long game. Okay, so we have a Shieldred. We'll get our opponent to tap down just in case they have a counterspell, so we'll swing with Obliterator. They'll cast Go for the Throat and kill it. We'll play Shieldred. Unless they let us have this. Which, almost certainly that they won't. Yeah, perfect. So, exactly what I thought would happen. Looking good. Play out Shieldred. Play out the Dread Knight. Eventually they'll draw into a board wipe, so we do want to be fairly aggressive with our board states. At least now that we have a Shieldred, our opponent's going to have to deal with that in some way, or all of the card draw that they get off of Intimidation Campaign is going to start hurting them a lot. See, after attacks, I also think getting out Virtue is going to be really strong for us. It's going to protect us. It's going to protect us from board wipes. We'll have a Thoughtstalker Warlock already in there. Okay, so they don't have a way of dealing with Shieldred right now, so they're going to lose some extra life off that card draw. You can also make foods with the Restless Cottage. That might be our best bet. Long Goodbye kills the cottage, though. So I think we'll start by moving to combat. Swing out. 7 damage. Sounds good. Back in their hand. We'll get to draw another card off the Dread Knight. I do love the recurring value that we're getting here. So let's get that guy back on an adventure. Play a land for turn. I do want Glissa on the battlefield, and I do want the Dread Knight back. Giving us options. Eventually we'll just be able to play out our Virtue. Shieldred's life gain is also really nice for us. And conveniently very punishing for the deck that our opponent is playing. Okay. Not concerned yet. Or Intimidation Campaign, so they still don't have a way to remove Shieldred. Down to 10. And again, the life gain on Intimidation Campaign isn't really mattering at this point, because it does ping them for 1 each time they do it. Yep. 11 down to 9. And we've got it. Okay, so those were some pretty good games there. Now, I know we didn't really get to see a strictly discard matchup, but I will say that this deck does fare very well into those for some of the reasons that we talked about earlier. But even against a variety of other non-Discord decks, this is a powerhouse in Standard. I've been enjoying playing this and been getting a lot of really good value out of it. Best advice that I could give you is make sure that you strike the appropriate balance between applying pressure to your opponent and defending yourself, because you are trying to win in the mid-game, not necessarily push a long game, unless you're playing up against a deck that you know is an aggro deck. So, for instance, use some of your early creatures to deal damage to your opponent to force them to block the Phyrexian Obliterator in the late game, right? Because most of the time, if your opponent has to start blocking Phyrexian Obliterator, I mean, you're on the fast track to winning the game at that point. As for opening hands, anything where you have either a Bushwhack to get you the extra lands you need, or something like Virtue or Dread Knight so you have a strong turn 2 play, is going to be a very strong hand. And then if you had to choose in the early game between keeping Baloth or Obliterator, I'd recommend the Baloth just because of all of the discard that's in the format right now. But if you do have a fight spell, I'd keep the Obliterator instead, just because maybe that can set up a fun situation where you fight your opponent's creature and win the game there. Yeah, aside from that, if you have any questions about how this deck plays, or if you have any ideas for another deck that you'd like to see me play, why don't you let me know in a comment down below. I'll see you all next time.